I think now we can move on to the Q&A portion for today's event. We have a lot of questions in the Q&A box, and I think in the interest of time, maybe one or two panelists can take each question that we have here. Just to start off, we have from Al Alegre. He's asking, maybe some of the panelists can also describe and comment on the state's institutional infrastructure that enables the disinformation. So for example, the Office of the Spokesperson, PCOO, State Info Ecosystem, such as PIA, RTVM, PTV4. Would anyone like to take this question?
Right, I'll start with that. Well, I think the difficulty, especially now that we're in the pandemic, is that press conferences are now not in person. They've now been converted to Zoom. There was a time when it was just a one-way, it wasn't a press conference at all because they filter the kind of questions that are being answered. So you can't even ask follow-up questions. Now they do have Zoom conferences that you can ask and follow up. But again, the release of information is really heavily reliant on officials, government officials giving you data, giving you pictures, even if it's not their turf. But you rely on them to provide you with information, and there's a problem with that setup because you want to protect access, but at the same time want to report on them. So how do you balance that? Do you crop a person from the photo at the risk of not being able to get more pictures in the future? Do you not credit that person with the photo? And then the next thing you know, you won't have pictures in the coming days. So how do you balance that? And how can you critically report on them if you rely on them for information? I agree that although there are efforts to have that FOI bill here, it hasn't been working. I think there was an EO that was released, but reality is that it's not being implemented. So you still rely on your access to be able to get certain information, and that becomes tricky because not all government officials appreciate your role. There are those who will not provide you with information because they feel that you've antagonized them, when in reality, you're just doing your job. So government officials should understand that whatever information they give us is not out of, we don't owe them a sense of gratitude for them providing us the information. It's actually part of their work. And we're also doing our work, but being critical about what they do.
We also have another question here about engaging social media companies. And I think Celine touched on this earlier, but our attendees asking, its extraordinary reach, its interactivity, and its toxicity and hyperpartisanship. What are your organization's strategies for engaging and deploying and also calling out social media platforms?
I think there are two dimensions to it. One is working in tandem. Like we've always, at Rappler, we've always described this as critical collaboration, meaning you work with them to help them improve the platform, and that's what the fact check collaboration, for instance, the third party fact check collaboration where Verifiles and Rappler are part of that collaboration. But at the same time, it's also about looking at and investigating how disinformation, and hate speech circulate in these platforms, and how whether initiatives that they're doing, or even the primary algorithms that work that are powering up these platforms, how are these actually affecting democratic discourse? That those are all part of what needs to be done. It needs to be in layers.
Yeah, and there are shortcomings. There are things that can still be improved, but these initiatives by platforms that are trying to lessen the reach of disinformation on their platforms, or to label it, I think that's a step forward, rather than totally not doing anything at all. Yeah.
So we have a question here for Camille specifically. The attendee says, Philstar is known not only for its savage fact-check tweets that provide context to public official statements, but also for its meme tweets, which do not only provide the news, but also somehow a reaction about the news. So the attendee wants to know, but there are comments saying this is already a way of editorializing the reporting of the news. Is that your goal, to readily provide sort of a commentary on the news using the memes, or was it a strategy to engage the audience?
Right. Yeah. Well, first of all, I hope Philstar gets more known beyond just the tweets. You know, you maybe click the links there, read the reports behind it. You'll see that Philstar is just more than the what do you call savage tweets. And that's what that is actually what surprised me. You know, the first tweets about that were off this style came from the newsroom, came from the desk. And it was surprising for us that people reacted this way when we started fact checking, and they would interpret it as that we were being savage, or we were throwing shade. But really, there wasn't really that intention. It's just really the contrast one statement that has been said with the statement that was said before by the same person, by the same official. And so we didn't really have, that kind of intention. But of course, this is a new medium. Twitter is a different environment. We, as a news organization, we also did make a decision on how we can experiment on the kind of reporting we could do on Twitter, and we did push the envelope. One thing that we started using was memes. I think the very first one was when we were reporting about an idea that was being pushed in Congress about renaming an airport in the middle of a pandemic. Everyone else was on lockdown. And so one meme just captured all the other things that we could write about it. Like, this is said in the middle of a pandemic. This is floated as even a priority. That legislators are thinking about this at this time when they should be thinking about the budget and stimulus, like that. So it just captured all the other parts of reporting in one meme. Now, of course, the subsequent parts of that was, of course, experimentation, pushing the boundaries, seeing how people also would react. So there was an intentional part of it, and there was also the unintentional. And we do learn, we do listen to feedback. There were voices then that suggested that we can't go up to this limit, and it's a learning experience. This is a new digital might be already here. We've been in digital for a few decades now, a couple of decades, but it's still very much new. It's newer than radio. It's been there for centuries. Film, etc., all the media. So this is an aspect of how will the news look like in the future. So we can take these experiments also with a lot of thought, also with a grain of salt, and then that will help us shape how we can envision the news as we go forward.